Hi, and welcome to Jarhead's first tutorial on mission making. Today I'll be covering some of the basics of mission making, such as the components of the mission and the mission folder, the correct naming schemes you should be using when making missions. I will touch on spawning units in, and briefly touch on the concept of locality. Alright, so let's get right into it. So, when making a mission, normally you want to follow a certain rigid naming scheme. And what that is basically you start off with naming. The front of it will be a CO60. So what that is saying is it's a cooperative mission, not a PvP, and it has 60 slots. This is good to use because when you have multiple missions on a server and you're looking to play one, you have a certain amount of people, you want to know how many slots the mission has so you could fit everyone in. Next you'll follow is the underscores, which you would put an underscore, and then test mission would be whatever name follows. And then at the very end you would put a V, which stands for version, and then the correct number of which version that is. It's good to always version your missions because when you have multiple copies of the mission, you want to know which one's the latest mission. And then it'll be followed by a dot, and whatever that last part, it could be Chenerus, it could be Altus, that is the map that the mission is actually on. Some of the common mistakes I've seen when people name them is they like to put a V01.2, and the problem with that is the mission reads that dot as the end of the file, so when you go into the mission to edit it and make changes, it won't save the changes. So when you'll upload it and you'll wonder why are the changes not made. Well, it's because you put a dot in the end of the file before the actual ending of the file. Alright, so now that we've talked about the naming scheme of the mission folder, let's get into the components of it. So as you can see here, at first I have a lot going on in this mission folder, but really when you break it down into the parts, it's quite simple. I'll explain it piece by piece. So the top folders are part of our framework. DAC is a spawning script folder for spawning units in. And F is the framework, which holds a bunch of scripts that are required for framework to work. And framework I'll go into later. Iggy load is a logistics script that I use for loading objects into vehicles and out of vehicles. Images is the folder obviously containing images. R3F is another logistics script that I like to use for my missions. It makes it very easy to manipulate objects and to be able to store crates into vehicles and take them out of vehicles. And then we have the scripts folder. This contains all the scripts that I use in the mission for spawning units to whatever I may need, transferring objects and such forth. The next folder is the ZBE_cache folder. This is a very crucial component for mission builders, is this caching folder. What this set of scripts does is it allows you to put multiple units on the map, and it will then cache these units until the players are with a certain range. Once they're within that certain range, it will uncache the units. This adds to a dramatic increase in FPS and overall performance for all the players. The next file we have is the description.ext file. This file holds the general information about the mission. For now though, we'll only be concerned with the top portion of this file, and in later tutorials I'll go into all the rest of the file about the functions and how framework is integrated in it. So at the beginning here we have the co-op, which is the type of mission. We have a minimum 1 player and a max of 60 players. So this 60 should correlate with the 60 at the top. With your naming scheme of the mission. The next part we have here is the author of the mission, so who made the mission, and then we have the load text, so the text that will be at the top of the mission, and the onload mission, which will be the text at the bottom, and then the type of picture. With our framework you can use JPEGs and PAA file formats. Alright, so the next file we have is the init.sqf, which is the initialization file. At this point, it's worth noting that what I use to edit these files is called a Poseidon text editor. You can I've posted the link down below for where you can download it off of arma, but really you could use any sort of hex editor or Notepad++ to edit these files. So in this file is where we will be calling our init framework, we'll be calling our headless client, starting our repetitive cleanup, declaring our global variables, and declaring the encryption for the TFR so that all radios are encoded the same. We'll also be starting our logistics scripts and then also our caching script. The next file we have is the init framework. The init framework is basically everything that initializes the framework so that we can use all the scripts. The framework holds the group markers, group IDs. As you can see, I have a lot of this stuff commented out because it is not necessarily needed. The next crucial script that we have in the mission folder is the init player local.sqf. Now this script is very important because if you want to run something on the players that is run only once and is local to the players, then you'd use the script. So if I wanted to do custom gear, I would do it in the script rather than in the init boxes of the units in the editor, which is run every single time a player connects. Some of the problems that I've seen with this is that when other mission makers have been trying to add custom gear, they would put it in the initialization boxes, which is run every single time a player connects. So if I had give this player a certain magazine, one magazine in the initialization box, and every time a JIP player came in or joined in progress, then it would add another magazine into that player slot. So you could have tons and tons of magazines in this player. After that, we have the init servers.sqf. So this in the script is where you would want to run anything on the server and run it only once when the mission starts. This is good for if you wanted to hold all the units on the map in a certain position until the players all connected and got into the game, or if you wanted to execute scripts such as to fill players into vehicles at the start. After the init server, we have the mission.sqm. This is the core component of your mission. This is where everything is saved. This is where all the mods are saved on which mods you have in the mission, which units you have in the mission, and so forth. In later tutorials, I'll explain how to interact with this and how to change things if you wish. But be very cautious when interacting with this, and I recommend you don't do it now because you could break your mission and it will not start if there are incorrect values in the script in this file. After that, I have the mission picture, which I normally keep in the root folder. This can be in a JPEG format or a PAA format. I then have this vehicle script. This is the vehicle respawn script that I use, and it is in the root directory because it does not change from mission to mission, as where scripts inside the scripts folder would generally change mission to mission. One important thing to note about this mission is that notice how all the files are neat. One of the problems I've seen with other mission makers is they like to throw everything in this root file or root directory. It's not recommended. It becomes a messy mission and it just looks very unneat and unorganized. If you have images, they should go into the images file. If you have sounds, you should create a folder called sounds and throw them in there. If you have scripts, they should go in the scripts folder, and so forth. The cleaner the mission, the better it is for when you come back later.